So here's the thing that no one wants you to know. Excellent service can save a bad meal, but an excellent meal can be ruined by bad service. We think it's time that the front of the house got the spotlight they deserve. Welcome to Dine and Dish, where the business of dining meets the art of hospitality. Well, hello everyone. We are back once again for another episode of Dine and Dish. And I can't even believe it, but Thanksgiving has come and gone, and we are now in full swing of holiday and Christmas and New Year's. And then 2026 is here. I don't even know where the year went, but today's show is going to be super exciting. I have a friend on and a colleague. We met, oh my goodness, I'll let him answer that question in a couple minutes, but I think we met almost 8 years ago now in Florida. But we're going to talk hiring and staffing for the holidays. It's always a crazy topic when you ramp up, and then what do you do with talent that you hire? And how do you keep them on? And I brought on an expert to talk everything hiring today. So before we get started, let me introduce Carl Griffenkranz. He's a professional staffing recruiter that I've worked with for a long time, and he's the vice president of talent acquisition for EHS Recruiting Company. So Carl, are you on the line?
I am here.
Well, welcome. I'm excited to have you on the show today. And before we get started, I'm going to let you just say a couple words, introduce yourself to the listeners. And how long have we known each other now? Has it been 8 years?
Yeah, I still mark everything as pre and post COVID. So I know it was pre COVID. So that's 5 years. So I want to say it was around 2018, 2017, 2018. So I've been recruiting full time for 10 years now. And we met pretty early into me jumping back into this. So
I know. Oh my God. Isn't that horrible that we have to start marking things pre-COVID and post-COVID? It's almost like, BC, AD, like we're going
yes,
back to like
I,
crazy times, right?
I literally just read an article over the weekend about how many people that still speak in pre and post COVID. It warped everyone's thinking and timeline, that if people listening to the show start talking to their friends about it, they'll realize how many people are still kind of bookmarking their life with COVID.
Yeah. Well, imagine our kids growing up. I mean, they're going to actually say they lived through a pandemic. I mean, think about that. I mean, no one ever thought that would really happen again. I mean, years and years and years ago. I mean, obviously they've had many pandemics, but I mean, for us now in this age to live through a pandemic, that's kind of crazy. But that's, we're going to talk a little bit about that in terms of staffing later on the show. But before we do that, how was your holiday?
You know what? It was lovely. Just 5 people. Although I've learned that when you're cooking for 5, you can pretty much cook for 15 because it's all the same amount of work. But this was the first year I did what my wife asked me to do. And I brined the turkey. Um, and I have a smoker, but I didn't want to smoke it but with the wood chips. But I actually smoked the turkey at 250 for 6 hours. I brined it for 6 hours. And it was the first time the turkey was truly well. And my wife made a beautiful compound butter with all herbs and stuff. But even 4 days later, the breast meat was still moist. So the next the next turkey that I'm going to cook for Christmas, I'm going to try and do the same thing and just do slow and low. I used to use Alto Shams back in my restaurant operations days, and we always did our turkeys overnight. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just do that in the smoker? So that's what
Yeah.
I'm most proud of, a turkey that was worth eating.
Wow, that's actually very impressive because everybody always hates turkey. Every year we go to New York. We spend Thanksgiving in New York. We start off with family, and my sister-in-law does a huge spread. And this is the first year it was kind of different just because they had sold their home and she's kind of in between. And we were moving food from one kitchen and then the oven didn't work, but everything came out amazing. And the first thing we talked about was, even the kids are like, oh my God, we hate turkey. It's the worst. But you know what? Even with our new concepts with the VV's chicken and mac, when you brine any type of white meat, it changes the flavor. It changes how soft the meat is. So, I mean, it makes a huge difference, especially for turkey.
Yeah, it really does. And I grew up in New York, so I thought you were going to talk about the seven fishes, but my wife, who's from Boston, doesn't understand why my family doesn't matter what holiday meal it is. It could be a Jewish holiday or a Christian holiday. There's always like a lasagna or stuffed shells or baked ziti. She's like, "Why that doesn't fit?" I was like, "Well, as a kid, I always wanted to eat pasta. I didn't want to eat brisket or turkey or whatever fish or leg of
Right.
lamb." So to me, every holiday table needs an Italian dish on it. Either sausage,
Yeah.
peppers, and onions for meatballs. So I haven't done the seven fishes yet. So I need to get invited to someone's house that does the full traditional
Well, if
Italian
you weren't in
tradition.
Florida, you could come visit us, but you're a little on the far side.
Yes. Well, maybe 2026, I'll come up to you guys for a free meal.
Absolutely. So, why don't we jump into, since we're talking so much about the holidays, why don't we jump right into the show today and start talking about staffing? And you started off mentioning COVID. And before we get into actually holiday staffing, why don't we talk about what you see the current conditions are since pre-COVID versus post-COVID, and the hiring pool and the candidate pool, and why staffing was so much harder after COVID. And I mean, why don't you kind of start off the show with, let's talk about COVID and how things have changed.
Sure. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years. Sometimes it feels like 5 months, and other times it feels like a lifetime ago. Our industry, the restaurant and hospitality industry, it's a tough business. It's very demanding. It's hard to be a single mom or single parent, or want to see your kids play sports or go to church or temple on the weekend. So that to me inherently makes this a challenging industry to staff in.
Right.
Although people get excited, I mean, it really is a fun job. And one of the things that I always liked about it was that there's a finite beginning and end of each day. Where what I do now, it's just endless. But at least with a restaurant, you opened, you prepped, you served, you cleaned, you prepped again, you served, you cleaned, and it was done. And I like
Right.
that.
Right.
So taking that aside, with COVID, with with the fear that everyone had and the unknown of, is this a 2 week thing, a 2 year thing? Are we all going to die? None of us are going to die. And so many companies just fired people poorly, I would say, and most would agree in retrospect. No severance, no notice, just a whole lot of people getting phone calls over 2 or 3 days. We're shut down, we're closed, and many people live paycheck to paycheck. I'm 100% commission, so my whole business was shut down. So we all went through that. Fast forward a bit, then trying to get people back into the industry
Yeah.
was a big challenge.
Especially restaurant and retail. I really believe that restaurant was probably the hardest to hire for. I mean, we were lucky because we kept most of our stores open. So hiring, we didn't have to get rid of everybody and ramp back up and bring everybody back on. But we had a lot of friends and a lot of restaurants that really had a hard time with staffing. And I really believe things have changed so much since COVID in the restaurant business in terms of staffing. You know, the third party delivery, and there's been so many different shifts and changes with where all of the restaurant staff could go. It used to be they went into restaurants, they went into hospitality, that was their passion. But restaurants kind of went to so many different hybrids, whether it was fast casual, full service, third party, delivery, whatever. So there was so many different ways for people to ramp back up after COVID and things
Yeah,
opened
food
up.
trucks, ghost kitchens. I think the ghost kitchens they're
Yes.
kind of dying out. That whole concept from what we've seen on a large scale, but the food truck business really took off and still seems to be growing strong. At least where I am in South Florida, almost every week or weekend there's some kind of mobile food truck party in a parking lot, and
Well,
we're
and now
starting.
you have Wonder. Think now you have these little mini food halls. I mean, Wonder's like the do you even have Wonder in Florida yet?
I've not heard of them before. No.
Oh, okay. Google Wonder. So Wonder is hitting everywhere. I mean, I saw a ton of them in New York. There's a ton in New Jersey. They're coming to Maryland. This is a concept where it's like mini food halls. And if they take a space, because obviously retail space, there's so much of it open. A lot of retail, especially retail's online. So there's opening more and more spaces. And they're taking these larger 3,000, 4,000, and they're making mini food courts. So think of a food court in a mall, but they're doing it in open retail space.
We actually had one large kind of fancy. They were trying to be fine dining type Chinese, like a PF Chang, but it was an independent, but along those lines of overpriced Chinese food in my mind. But it didn't survive after COVID. And
Right.
what the owner did was it was probably almost a 5,000 square foot building, and that's what he did in his own in his restaurant. He made four restaurants within his one restaurant, and it's very cool. It's four different styles of Asian food, and you got your little mini food court there. And I kind of joke as a Gen Xer, right? The malls and the food courts, we spent Lord knows how many, at least I did, Fridays and Saturdays, and in the winter you hung out at the mall. Um, but it's funny because it's like adult versions. It's like charcuterie is an adult lunchable. Some of these food halls they're the adult version of our food courts, and I love it. I have a picky family, and it's really
Yeah.
easy when everyone can find something
I
they
was
like.
gonna say it is kind of a cool concept when you have multiple people going to one place. They have every type of food that makes everybody happy. So I get the concept, but it's also fast casual. So it's like going to a food court. So I don't know, if it's well, and they use it for third party and delivery as well. So that makes it easy as well. So if you are getting third party or you are getting delivery, they have one place to go and they can pick up all different types of food. So I guess it is kind of, I don't know. I mean, that gets into that whole idea of what happens later with robotics and how the whole restaurant industry is going to change. So that'd be interesting to see what the trends are and the state of the market for 2026.
Yeah, I guess, and see how that'll affect people like me in staffing when the robots take over some of the jobs and eventually my job. But hopefully I'll
Exactly.
be
Well,
retired.
when we end the show, I'm going to ask you about that. So, but before we get into the whole holiday piece, let's just talk state of staffing. I mean, what's the market look like these days? I mean, I'm I'm not as much into the full service restaurant as I used to be. I mean, most of our stores are fast casual, but talk both. I mean, I know you staff for both full service and fast casual. Fill me in on what you think the whole market and hiring outlook has been for 2025 and what it looks like for the rest of the year.
Sure. I mean, 2025 has been a very weird year. I would say, I don't care what the government numbers would say, but we entered a recession at the end of 2024. Is typically when restaurants, and we work with, golf courses, casinos, cruise ships, restaurants, hotels. And I just tend to say restaurant by default, and I should say hospitality.
Hospitality, yeah,
But
sure.
the majority of our clients are restaurants. We really saw a slowdown and a pullback in spending. Um, then throw in the tariff curveball
Mhm.
that messed up food costs. I had a friend of mine that he owns 20 seafood restaurants and gets all the shrimp from Asia. And like one day, I'll make up a number. One day it was $8 a pound, then it was $18 a pound, and you can't change your menu. And then throw on top of that the tariffs, how they might affect the cost to build your restaurant. So we had clients that stopped building or got out of leases if they could because just the
Mhm.
cost of equipment and build out and remodels made our business unaffordable. Then layer on one more thing with very high interest rates, and that all of that together has slowed down the growth, especially on the restaurant side. um,
Right.
so it's been a slow year until about 6, 7 weeks ago. It started to pick up again. And I don't know if some of the restaurants did better than they thought, or oftentimes, you can only hold out for so long before you have to start hiring people, whether it's with a recruiter or not. So
Right,
we're,
right.
we're starting to see a little bit of light. And oddly enough, 2024, the first 3 quarters of the year were quite slow for us, and the last quarter was probably one of the best quarters collectively as a company we had. So I was been praying all year for the same. So a long-winded answer is we're hoping that we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we come into 2026 and come out a bit more like a rocket ship. It does seem like maybe some more Fed interest rate cuts are coming. That will spur the development and building of new restaurants, since most restaurants are built with borrowed money.
Yeah. So that leads into so we're talking about hiring. So restaurants, hospitality, markets are ramping back up and there's more money in terms they're putting into recruiting and hiring, but let's talk about the applicants because I mean, are we getting the qualified and quality applicants that are easy to staff or are we having to get creative of how do we bring that pool in and what are you doing and what challenges are you facing to staff your open invoices or open call orders.
This year there's been a lot of layoffs in the gray hair category, which I'm now a part of. So really seeing 45 and up, but especially in the
Did you call
52,
them gray hair?
the gray hair club, yes. We can go with the Salt and Pepper Club,
I
but
was going to say, and if they paint them, what do you call them?
then they're part of everyone else. But since I've been told I'm not allowed to dye my hair from the
Are you
boss,
allowed to even call them gray hair? Is that an HR correct term?
definitely not an HR correct term. But I think as I'm part of that group now, I'm allowed to use that term. Um, but all joking aside, the amount of layoffs that have hit the 6 figure people and above, right? So
Yeah.
VPs, directors. I've had more C-level people calling me that I thought they were calling to hire me or reuse me again. All have been laid off. That's a whole separate podcast about private equity money and the changes that that's brought on with our industry. But
Yeah.
if you're willing to hire someone, uh, let's just say 50 and above, you could get some really amazing talent right now. If you're willing to let someone step down in title and pay to get another shot at your restaurant or your hotel, you could get some fabulous talent. If you're still chasing I want the 30-year-old or 28 to 40-year-old, which of course no one would ever say to me on a phone call because that would be illegal. But if they said it or inferred it, or I'm looking for mid-career, that's still very challenging. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
So you brought up an interesting point. And I was actually going to ask this later, but let's kind of segue into that. In terms of the hourly rates, the pay scales, you mentioned something if, you could hire over 55. I mean, a lot of companies obviously always want to look for the younger in the 30s because they have more longevity and I don't know why they think that because obviously the older you are, the more experience you have and the more I think quality behaviors and the way they handle situations are better in the marketplace. But how much flexibility does the culture and the age matter to somebody looking for a job or hiring for a job than the hourly rate or the pay scale? So, a lot of times people say, well, I just want X amount of money. But are they being more flexible now because they'd rather pick and choose where they work over a certain pay rate? Are you seeing a switch or, any type of shift in that type of
uh,
mentality?
yeah, in the last 6 months, there are many people of all ages and levels understanding that they very likely will be taking a step back in pay. Or if they can move laterally, they need to be happy. Companies have cut back on the salary wages. I've seen bonus programs shrunk. We all know health insurance costs are insane, and that
Ridiculous. And they don't cover anything either. Actually, you and I had that call a couple weeks ago. We were on the phone and I think you were yelling
yes,
regarding
yes, I was because my
because they don't
insurance
cover anything.
company.
It's a joke.
Yeah, so the surgeon who does she's an ankle surgery specialist, and I need a little scope and clean, and she was going to put um, some I'm just totally blanking cartilage in there where
Yeah.
mine is missing. It's not an experimental surgery. This is what this woman does all the time. She's well known in South Florida. She works on lots of athletes. My insurance company said we're denying it because this is an experimental surgery. Woman's been doing this surgery for 10 years. I don't know how it makes it experimental, but
Wow.
we'll save that for a different podcast.
Right. Oh, well, I'm dealing with the same thing from my surgery when they told me it wasn't necessary and it was plastic. I'm like, really? It affected my entire range of motion. I could not lift my right arm above my shoulder, but it's plastics. Did I come out looking better after I had the surgery? I'm curious because I don't think I look any different.
Sorry, a functioning arm is now plastic surgery.
Oh
Like,
my
okay.
God. Anyway, so
But
so back to
yeah,
the shift in culture and hourly rate and pay
yeah.
scales.
So people, it's taking longer to get a position. So, people have maybe they're, hey, Carl, I want 90,000, nothing less. And a month or 2 or 3 months later, they're still looking for a job, which you and I know is not normal in the restaurant industry. If I'm an average or better person, I'm usually 6, 8 weeks max or less.
Right.
So yeah, I've seen where those people are taking less money. Not so much on the hourly. I've seen a bigger push for more money with the grill cooks and senior grill cooks, and really the back of house because typically front of house it's more tip driven,
Yeah.
where they're fighting for more wages and holding the line, and typically companies are paying them more and taking it out of the manager salary or trying to balance it that way.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of us in staffing. I mean, we've had a harder time finding quality people. And, that goes back to the whole mentality that you always think the better people are the ones working, not the ones that are laid off. So it's actually a question I was going to ask you later on the show. You know, should restaurateurs, should people in the hospitality industry actually go out and recruit? Because the ones you really want, or even recruiters like yourself, the candidate pool that you really want typically is working. The old mentality when I worked in retail, and even the years that I've been in the restaurant business, we always used to say the candidates that are not working typically are not working for a reason. So is that true? I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of finding the right staff?
Yeah, I've never bought into that mantra. Although I'll say it holds water at least half of the time. If I was just recently laid off, my company was sold. I literally this morning spoke to someone from Outback that spent the last 12 years of his career going right out of the military, worked his way all the way up to he was in a multi-unit training. And I don't know if Outback or Bloomin' Brands just announced like another 20 restaurants being closed, and he's in
Wow.
Maryland, and he was moved 2 years ago to open a new restaurant, and they whacked his restaurant, and now he's unemployed
Right.
through no fault of his own. He's still in a bit of shell shock because I think he feels that big company didn't care for me after I moved and gave up my whole life for them. But that's another podcast. We're gonna have a whole
I
year's
guess
worth of
Carl,
podcasts.
I was going to say, Carl, you might have to come back for show two, three,
But
four.
so in that case, I don't hold it against him. I just placed a chef who was out of work for 6 months. His wife, on their fifth baby, had some severe complications during the birth. So she's a nurse, so she couldn't go back to work, till she was fully healed. So I had a hard time finding him a job, and he was in Atlanta with a bunch of fine dining restaurants. Any other time he would have had a job in days, but
Yeah.
everyone was holding it against him that he was out of work, even though he's like, we have 5 kids. So I have 4 kids and a newborn. I'm a wife that was bedridden. That's why I don't like that mantra. Where it does hold true is when I see the resume where it's 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, one
Right.
year.
The job
Then,
hoppers.
yeah, then that is the person. But if you look at the whole package, and if they have good stability, 2.5, 3 year plus at the last couple of jobs, then give them a shot because they're probably unemployed not by their own choice.
Yeah. Well, let's talk the restaurant, the hospitality side. The good applicants, the strong ones, the ones that are the sought after. What makes a restaurant more attractive to the applicant? Because, also the applicant gets to choose. So just like you're interviewing the applicant is also interviewing the restaurant. So at the end of the day, what can operators do? What's your tips for restaurateurs or any type of hospitality service to be more appealing for the job seeker? So they pick you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and so many layers on that onion. Um, so I think part of it is where we get the candidate from. Is it a referral? Those are usually sought after. I'm already working. I'm not really looking, which is kind of nice because we're not worried about them having 8 different offers.
Hmm.
But for the restaurant, depending if I'm targeting younger, older people, college kids, and I bring up age because at different points of our life we have different needs, right? So if
Absolutely.
I can tailor that to someone's lifestyle and some flexibility, that's very attractive. Pay is important to a point. Once people hit around that 80,000 or more, it becomes less important, right? So if I go from 80 to 90,000, doesn't change my life as going from 35 to 45 does. So that's really where can I do a 4-day work week? Do I have to do 5? Is it still a
Yeah.
6-day work week? Restaurants that are closed, that's something that came back from COVID, which I love, especially the independent restaurants where they're just closing for 1 or 2 days.
It's funny you brought that up. A lot of restaurants do that now. Like their slowest day, whether it's a Sunday or a Monday, whatever the slowest day of the week is, they close for that whole day. I've never seen that before. The restaurant industry has always been 7 days a week, holidays, open to close, crazy hours. And I'm seeing that more and more. At the shopping center, we just opened Vivi's in Baydale. There's a full service restaurant closes every Monday, and that's the day that all staff is off.
And there's a lot of benefits to that. Sunday, Monday is ideal, just because people like the weekend off, or Monday, Tuesday. But
Right.
from a staffing perspective, because we have clients that way, everyone just works 5 days. There's not a problem with the schedule, and you take it or leave it from day one. Hey, you're always going to work, Tuesday to Saturday. That's it, period.
Right.
More or less. So I like that. Again, that's where Sunday, Monday is better than Monday, Tuesday. But it's just easier to staff. I could get away with less management. I don't have to cover. If I'm the GM, I'm just going to work 5 days a week, whether I work, 10,
Exactly.
11, or 12 hours, whatever it is. And that's it. And I don't need a second manager, God forbid, unless I quit, then you're really in trouble. But so that's, some of the perks could be, do I close one day a week? Look, it works for Chick-fil-A. If I was going to be in fast food, wouldn't you like to have a Sunday off guaranteed, and no one
Yeah.
at the company works, so you're never going to get a phone call? Um, so, I think the benefits retirement has become something we get asked a lot, especially when someone's in that 35 and up category. Do they have a 401k? Do they offer any match? I've seen people take less money to join a company that offers them a retirement plan. I
Hmm.
probably push it a bit too, just knowing that, especially now, who knows if my age group will be the first person to see their Social Security checks cut by 20, 30%.
Yeah. Actually, Jannar and I were just talking about that. We were just saying, when do you start a payout? When do you take it? When is it worth taking it early? Because who knows, it might not be there when it's time to retire. So we literally were just talking about that the other night. What's going to get cut? What's going to be available? You put all this time and money into it for years and years and years. And by the time you hit that number, it might not even be around anymore.
Yeah, thankfully it'll be around. It'd be better if it was around than fully funded. And given
Exactly.
the way our government works now, it'll get fully funded the year before it runs out, and probably not, or maybe a day before it runs out, but not
Oh,
probably
yeah.
much
Like our
before.
government shutdown.
Yes, which will be shutting down again soon enough, which then brings us back to
Ridiculous.
the hiring surge that we thought we might have could then get torpedoed again if we do go back into another, shutdown.
Yeah.
Um,
And we
so
don't want that either because it's horrible for the restaurant business in general. It's horrible for anybody. I mean, first off, you lay off a huge majority, everybody, especially in Maryland. We were talking statistics, and I think we said 68% work in some way, shape, or form for the government.
Yeah, and to your point, even if I'm not directly a government employee, but every restaurant,
Yeah,
bar, taxi, Uber, dry cleaner, flower shop, etc. I mean, that's one thing I saw post COVID is the downtown, happy hour Thursday, Friday, club, restaurant. That so many of them closed
yeah,
as a result of not having that post work or catering or even just a bigger lunch crowd. You go to a lot of the bigger cities, especially in 21, 2, and 3, prime real estate just sitting empty. That's just now really gotten refilled, especially where we are now. But as post the last shutdown, I've some of the pages that I'm part of with Facebook and others. Everyone's like, I'm done. I've seen more restaurants post, this is our last month, come eat here while you still can, in the last like 3 months than I have in the last 10 years.
yeah. So let's shift a little bit more towards holiday. I know you don't do a lot of seasonal type staffing or part time staffing, but in terms of your experience and your background, um, what's the process for ramping up for holiday? Do you see a lot of temporary staffing? Do you see more permanent staffing? What traits are best for seasonal? Is it better to hire seasonal? Is it better to forget the seasonal approach and just say, you know what, we want a really good, solid person? Because obviously after season you want to be able to keep them. I mean, especially Florida is very different because your season happens in January when all the snowbirds come down and everybody leaves the cold rainy snow. They get through the holidays and then everybody runs to Florida. And when we had the restaurant there, I mean, our staffing was much easier during the season than off season. But what's your experience? What's your thoughts behind the whole hiring strategy for holiday rush?
Sure. Well, you have your hourly surge and then you'd have your management surge. So, using South Florida, which also would cover into any of the ski mountain resorts or the beach towns in New Jersey and Long Island, the Hamptons, where I live, Fire Island. So, um, you know, for the hourly, it's great if you can leverage some of the high school and college kids because they know it's short term and you can
Right.
appeal to them. And then you're not worried about losing some of your key employees because they're not a threat. This year, it's been a bit easier to staff up because so many people have been laid off and people are willing to take jobs that they normally wouldn't. So that's been beneficial. From the management perspective, it's to me a good way to improve the strength of your team. So, using your restaurant in Fort Lauderdale, if you needed 4 managers during the year, but during the 4 to 6 month season, it's really more four. It used to be six. You needed two more. If one of those two people was a rock star, you were able to cut one of your original four. That was the weakest link. And it is a way I find for our clients to strengthen the bench and get a little better each year. Unfortunately, at the expense of someone losing their job, but it really pays off well. Um, to jump ahead a question as far as
Yeah.
how to do it, and this is where we do help some companies if it's a new restaurant opening or a big surge. But we found social media to be a great tool to reach hourly
Yeah.
employees,
Mhm.
right? So, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or something similar.
Well,
Um,
you read my mind because I was just going to ask you, what do you think social media, because everything these days, everything is about social media. I mean, whether it's advertising, it's TikTok, it's videos. I mean, even AI. I mean, let's talk AI just for 2 minutes. Even for Thanksgiving, my sister in law went to ChatGPT to say, hey, give me the best recipe for, let's just say, crab cakes. And ChatGPT went across the entire database, obviously, and pulled the best. And then it actually gave you statistics of this is a better recipe, this isn't. And I'll tell you what, some of the recipes were really good. I mean, how is AI going to affect? I mean, you mentioned TikTok, everybody watches TikTok, but what about AI in staffing? Do you see that as going to affect the whole staffing industry next year?
yes, it's already, I'll call it wreaking havoc this year, and then hopefully they'll be able to improve it by next year. I'm the internet generation, so when everything went to the internet and servers and emails, and we thought it would be great, and then everyone was drowning in hundreds of emails that people just didn't answer. AI's great, but there's been so many tools that were going to screen your resumes for you and do
Mhm.
interviews for you that haven't panned out. But I have seen some great technology where it's like doing a Zoom call, but you're speaking to a robot, or for lack of a better term, there's a fake person on the other line, and it walks you through an interview. And some I've done are horrible, and others I've done are great. And I go, I could see that as a very effective 15, 20-minute tool, to have
Yeah,
the
to
computer
weed out,
screen.
almost like a screening onboarding process.
Yeah, exactly. Especially for a big hiring push, that's what we do for clients. We'll just do a 10 to 15-minute quick screen, call it like the sniff check. And then what really makes things more efficient is having all of the players where they need to be. We have a couple of fast casual clients that they've really taken the ball and run with this. A little bit of coaching from us, and they got the C suite to agree. They're doing staffing days like open house, open call. They're advertise it with Indeed, with Zip, with Facebook, with Twitter, with Instagram, wherever they could put it. They'll hang posters in the restaurants. Everyone is there. There's 5 to 6 hiring managers that would normally be in the process. And instead of it, a 5 or 6 separate interview process, it's that day. And then you meet one executive on a second day. People are getting hired in a week. And it's
Yeah.
been great for hourly and management, because not everyone does well in meeting 4 or 5 people in the same day. So speed is of the essence, but it doesn't mean you have to shortchange the process. You just need commitment from your team. Everyone's going to be at this place on this day, and we're going to do it twice a week, every week for the next whatever couple of weeks until we get it done.
Yeah, well, speed dating or speed interviewing definitely works really well with new restaurants. And when you're opening a new restaurant, we did it. We did huge open houses. We did speed interviews. We did big group onboarding and onboard training. And so, I mean, obviously, if it works really well for new restaurants, it should work really well for holiday hiring when you need to ramp up pretty quickly. Because, I mean, like you said, speed is super important. You only have 6 weeks or 8 weeks during the holiday season to really hire, train, get them on the floor and be effective and efficient. So if you take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to interview and hire, you've already lost the whole onboarding time for the holidays.
Yep, you have. And if I'm a motivated job seeker,
Mm.
I'm going to have a job quickly, and especially at the hourly. If I'm a bartender or bar back or server, etc., bus boy, bus person, all I have to do really is walk down the street and with a stack of resumes and go into a restaurant after someone's going to hire me to start probably that day or that week. So yeah, if you're like, oh, well, we'll have decisions in 2 or 3 weeks, that anyone that's decent is gone, and whoever's still left over, unless they were by choice, you're going to regret hiring them.
Yeah. Well, this whole podcast is on service and hospitality and training and making sure that the guest truly is taken care of, because obviously the front of the house, this is a front of the house focused podcast. So let's talk just a couple minutes. I mean, we hired these people, you staffed great people, you put great people in front of these restaurants, but now you have the balance of, okay, I was hired. How do you get them on the floor and get them trained, especially in a full service environment? Because it's not a 1 day training. It's not like they're going to be at a register punching the POS. I mean, they have to go through an entire full training process. So, what tips or what quality ideas or creative ideas do you have that the listeners can kind of take in for quickly onboarding and effective and efficient training so the holiday staff is doing the job that they were hired to do?
That's a great question. And obviously, if I'm a single restaurant owner, operator versus, a larger chain, might handle it differently. But net, somebody needs to be there on day one with all the paperwork the employee needs to hand out, sign off. If we can get that email to them beforehand, they could bring it in even better. Let's kind of speed up the legal part. Make sure you're prepared as a company. There's nothing worse that for an employee when the company's not
To look
prepared.
like a hot mess.
Yeah, they didn't have my uniform. They didn't have my laptop.
Right.
They didn't have me on the schedule. And then you start thinking, I picked the wrong person to marry, you know? So make sure your basic blocking and tackling is done. And then do your best. I like hands-on training, especially for the front of house. So we're trying to copy the best culture from person A to person B. So your rock stars need to be identified and be certified, however you want to do that internally to train, right? And it's a good growth opportunity for them. I like companies that give me a bonus, $50, $100 every time I train someone new and they stay for, I don't care, 30 days.
Yeah.
But really make sure that you're not just, oh, Carl, you're here on Tuesday. I forgot. Yeah, Bob's on the bar today. Work with him, even though he's not really our best bartender. I've heard that before. So that's really the basic, simple one. Make sure you have them coming in when your best people are there and try and mirror their schedule to your best people's schedule, and you'll have a much better result. And then make sure you're testing daily or weekly. It doesn't have to be uber complicated, but whatever skills you wanted the trainer to teach them, make sure they actually did teach them. So you're not faulting the employee 2 weeks later and writing them up because they didn't do something when they had no idea they were supposed to do that.
Yeah. You actually brought up a really good point. And maybe that goes back into retaining the best employees as well. Motivating the first, obviously, you always put the new hire with the most senior and the most experience and your best server, bartender, floor manager. They hate it. They always hate it because it takes away from their time, it takes away from their money. They have somebody following them around and it's double the amount of work. And the holidays are stressful for your servers and your bartenders too. And now they have to train somebody with them. So you brought up a good point about motivating your staff to want to help and to want to do their best. And then that also helps with retention past the holidays, which we hope, works because you want to retain your best employees. You don't want them just to be seasonal. So that's also important. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. It really is an opportunity. I started my career in corporate HR, and I was mortified when at the end of the year we were doing all these reviews, and we all thought as employees the point of the review was to give me a raise. It really is only partially that. It's also how companies decide who's getting trimmed. And when
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
worked for a couple of Fortune 200 companies, 10% of the staff was eliminated every year. And then I realized that that's healthy. It's like trimming a tree, right? So if you take out your weakest links each time and hopefully you hire better, company does better, it grows. So your hourly staffing is a great opportunity to, I'm sorry, your seasonal staffing, right?
Right.
Is a great opportunity to find some new rock stars. And there's probably a couple of people in every business that they need to move on. Their choice or your choice. And it's a great way. Now you've had a 6 to 12 week trial run with this new person and you love them and you bring them in and you tell the other person, hey, you're going to be more successful elsewhere because you just won't be successful here. already kind of put you in that you got to go box.
Yeah. So you're never going to believe this, but our show is coming to an end. I told you you and I
No.
would have no problem talking for 40 minutes. When I was putting this together and I said, oh my God, I got to put this agenda together. And I said, I know we're not going to cover half the stuff on this agenda because you and I can talk about so many different topics in terms of hiring and staffing. But before we go, I need to get your thoughts on 2026, what you think and predict for hospitality and hiring and long-term staffing strategies, and then follow it up or finish it with your golden rule for staffing and hiring.
All right, I'm gonna have to talk even faster than I normally do.
Here you go. You're on the
Right,
clock.
we're up. Go. So let's say that Congress gets their act together and we don't have another shutdown, right? That's what we're all praying for, and we move forward. And we have the interest rate cuts. I do believe 2026 is our up year, assuming no curveballs, we invade Venezuela or we get attacked, right? Take all those off the table and we just look at things
Okay,
normally.
don't put anything in the air. Let's
That's
keep
true.
all positive. Don't put it out there.
I, I do feel 2026 will be a lot better than 2025, solely because what we've seen the last 2 months, we're starting to see that
Yeah.
push for growth. So
Mhm.
I do think things will be better within the hospitality industry and the hotels and planes, bookings. The cruise ships, they've been rocking it for a while, but they're their own little ecosystem. Um, as far as long term staffing, uh, when I ran a restaurant, I was only happy for 90 days max because I know after 3 months, somebody was leaving, right? It might take me half a year to get the perfect team, and it would only last about 90 days before somebody would leave. So for your hourly level employees, you should always be interviewing. Employees don't like it. It makes them a little nervous, a little uncomfortable. But because I'm a Gen Xer, I actually think that's a good motivational tool. So they don't feel that they have the power over us, right? If they see all these people interviewing and they realize we could replace them, the attitude changes. It's easier in the front of the house than the back of the house for sure. The back of the house,
Yes, for sure.
that will always be a challenge.
Mhm.
Um, and certainly reducing the amount of immigrants coming into the country who were often willing and able to do those jobs has really caused a
It
big
got
challenge.
more challenging for the restaurant business for sure.
Yep. So my advice to people is to continue to interview. There's plenty of restaurants that every Wednesday from 2 to 4 or every Tuesday, they change it and the GM or the managers are there and just are always collecting resumes. I have two teenagers. Months they tried to get jobs around here and everyone was just apply online, apply online. They just go to who knows where and then they never get a call back. So I
Right.
still had my kids resume in hand going into places and it worked just once. So that's another thing where, if somebody walks into your building with a resume, talk to them.
Oh,
Could be
of
five
course.
minutes,
I
right?
used to tell my managers, if you have somebody that comes in that looks great and could fit the role and they're professional and they're taking the initiative to come in and meet with you and hand you a resume and they're being aggressive, why are you not talking to them? Why are you sending them home to go get online to fill out an app? Because first off, when we interview, I mean, I say it all the time. When someone comes in to meet with me, the first thing to do is shove paper in your face and I'm like, talk to me. I don't need paper because what you put on paper, AI could have generated. I need you to tell me who you are, what you do, what you're going to bring to the table. And it's nice to see somebody face to face. I guess that's my old fashioned hiring, recruiting days. But, you know, I agree with you. I mean, you got to get out there. You got to do face to face. You got to be aggressive. If you want those good jobs, they're out there.
They are. And for people that are listening that are looking, LinkedIn, networking, if you can find the hiring manager of whatever job you sent to after you apply online, connect with them. And if you're already connected, they don't like it when I tell people to do this, but email them and LinkedIn message them. And if you have a phone number, call them, not all at once, but if they have 100 resumes, they don't want to read all 100. But if you're on top of the pile or you're proving to them that I'm truly interested in this job, then more than likely you're going to get the call over other people in that pile.
Right.
The one golden rule for staffing and hiring for me, I thought about this question and I kind of struggled with an answer, but the downside of how we hire, it's often we're hiring people like us or people we feel we can manage or will listen. we don't always hire the most qualified person. Maybe they're, to be inappropriate, too old, too young, too tall, too fat, too white, too yellow, too green, too many earrings, right?
Yeah.
People have all of these reasons to filter people out, and I feel not enough reasons to filter people in. So if we could get the C level or the owner, right? You own a business, I own a business. We need to set the tone and say, we're going to hire the most qualified people. I don't care if they're 20 or 200. I don't care if they're overqualified. Maybe we can get more out of them than what we're paying for. So let's really give people a shot. And I don't mean Carl was making 300,000 and he's going to take my $50,000 a year restaurant manager job. He's probably not. Unless he just sold his home and moved down to Palm Beach and he's bored and needs something to do, maybe, but probably not.
Yeah.
But be open-minded, especially for tough to fill jobs. And it would be great if companies could invest in training again and not only hire people that are exactly doing that job. There are transferable skills out there. I can't teach someone to smile, be happy, be motivated, show up to work all the time, like be a ray of light in your restaurant. I can't train that. That's who they
Right.
are in their
Well,
DNA.
personality, you can't train personality, but you can train skill.
Yeah, I'm right. I can
Yeah,
teach you how
I
to
agree.
ring a register or cook a hamburger. I can't teach you to be a happy person.
Exactly.
So that's really where I'd love that people go back to hiring on potential and personality, not that piece of paper. Because to your
Right.
point, AI does a great job creating resumes. We may have no water or no power if we all keep going down the AI route, but
Yeah.
you know, um, but,
Yeah.
but that's another podcast.
Right, exactly. Well, Carl, I am going to ask you to send me your details. So when the show goes live, I can share, as long as you're okay with it, your recruiting services. So if anybody out there is listening to the show and they are looking for a career in hospitality and front of the house and service, they can reach out to you. And for our listeners, our DMs are always open. You can always reach me through restaurantdiva.com, through our website. Feel free at any time to call. We love to hear from you. We love your questions. We love your enthusiasm. Please continue to continue listening to the show, and we'll have a new episode every Wednesday, and amazing topics just like we had today with hiring and retaining and bringing on the best employees and how to prepare for 2026. And Carl, thank you so much for being a part of my history and helping me staff our restaurants, and for participating today on the show with me.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I had a lot of fun.
And we'll have to do it again. You'll have to come back for a new topic.
Yes, 2026 Q1. I don't know what we're going to talk. We're going to talk about how wonderful it is, and that my prediction was correct.
Yes, from your mouth to God's ears. I love it. And I hope you have an amazing holiday and a happy new year. And I will talk to you soon. And once again, everybody, thanks for listening. And that's another episode of Dine and Dish. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.